My people, today we have a gospel that it can be understood superficially, which is to summarize the salvation that Jesus comes to believe in him. It could very well say that I believe in Jesus and I am already saved, since faith saves us, since belief in God is a guarantee of salvation. And we can make here a speech that did not imply so much, that it did not descend so much the staircases of the concept of belief. And we would be calm believing that believing in God is enough. But then we need to understand that believing is a dynamic verb that requires us commitment. Because I may well summarize faith in God in just having a theoretical formulation. I have a theory, and I guide this theory, and this theory is all that I believe to be important, to be true, and each one finds a way of believing in God. And we who are Christians are facing a text that tells us that believing in God is important. It is fundamental for us to be saved. And the concept of salvation is also very wide, because we cannot only think of salvation as a reality that will be delivered to us after death. No. Every Christian needs to live in constant state of salvation. And how does God save us? Believing in him, having in it the reference that guides us to find the way we want to follow. That is why the concept of belief, it is dynamic, it is existential, it mixes in life, because believing does not only mean professing, theoretically, a faith. Believing is you embodying what you believe. And in the case of Christianity, we can only be Christians if we embody the presence of Jesus, the person of Jesus, whom we find in the sacraments, which we find in the Word, which we find in confession, communion, which we find in coexistence. It is a privileged place of the real presence of Jesus. It is in the other. He said that, I am not inventing. At the end of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus talks about the conditions to be saved. Visit when he is sick, giving food when he is hungry, be shelter when he is discovered. And the disciples asked, okay, but when did we see him hungry? When did we see him thirsty? When did we see it in need to be sheltered? Then he puts himself in the other's shoes, and he says, every time you have denied doing this to a minor of my brothers, mine, you are denying me. So you see, Jesus immediately identifies himself, has no mediation. Where there is a needy person, whether of spiritual health, physical health, spiritual food, material food, spiritual shelter, material shelter. There Jesus is present. Acid is present here in the Eucharist. Oh, but we don't want this commitment. That's too much for us. Yeah, I am sorry to inform that if we do not understand this yet, we do not believe. Because believing is not just repeating theological formulas, it is not just knowing color catechesis. It is to embody Jesus' proposal. And Jesus' proposal is that each of us could be where we are, with whom we are, their real presence. So he is in the one who helps. He is in the one he receives. And we, par excellence, because we are configured in it. We are beings of communion. To believe in God is to bring your desire to the world. And it is very interesting because in the first reading it says that we are with a hard head we have difficulty understanding. But a lot. We understand God what suits us. We are often adapted to a chewed Christianity. Easy to swallow, often vain glamorized. How many times do we perceive ourselves within a Christian Christianity of spiritual vanity? Are we better than others? We are saved and others do not? How many times do you find a believer, I am not saying evangelical, that when I grew up, where I grew up, every time I spoke believer, it was the evangelical people? No. Believer is everyone who believes. So when you find a vain believer who feels better than others, who feels more special than others, for God lost everything from Christianity. It has been lost from Christianity for a long time. And the belief is not moving the heart where it needs to be moved. No, we cannot simplify Christianity and turn it into a theory that does not transform our lives. You need to transform our life. You need to transform our heart. The experience we make of Jesus, it will unfold in attitudes later. What's the point of coming here to commune? Participate beautifully, sing, hear the sermon. If I'm not a being of communion, what's the use of participating in the Eucharist? I have my sacraments up to date if I don't get the wave of hatred in the day. I'm being inconsistent. Every time I assume it is an instrument of hatred, and this is how the devil gains his place in the world. Who legitimizes the devil in the world is us. Because we all have the portions of kindness. No one is totally bad and no one is totally good. Now everything is creating, recreating, and multiplying. When I choose to be a person who legitimizes the presence of hatred in the world, of course, I am ceasing to legitimize the presence of good. There is no way I do both. At some point in your life, have you been able to be a good and bad person at the same time? At the same time, no. Sometimes you may have had the opportunity to, in fractions of a second, move from evil to kindness, or the opposite as well. Of kindness you pass, in a fraction of a second, evil. Why? Because everything in life is a choice. Until when we don't choose, it's a choice. Unfortunately, when I'm not choosing, someone is choosing for me. When I think I'm in the imperative of my will, someone is taking care of her. And that is precisely what has happened. The episode that is so recent by Vinny Jr. suffering that horrible attitude in a stadium full of people who left home to have fun. Those people left home because they wanted to see football. There are people who have no better distraction than football. And suddenly who started? It was certainly a person who gave the first racist, prejudiced, evil, devilish scream. And that was gaining body to the point of being staunch images. It gives us the feeling that the whole stadium is shouting offenses to that boy who left home to play his football. It is an easy example to understand how the devil gains the power to act in the world. When a person legitimizes his presence and moved by wickedness he has attitudes that hurt, who cheat, and then gaining fans, generating connections. And suddenly, that's why the crowd is so dangerous, because a crowd can easily become an instrument of hatred. The opposite is also true. Suddenly, it was missing in the crowd someone who shouted the different, who shouted a compliment, and that other people started to scream a compliment to that boy. But no. Unfortunately, at that time, what prevailed, what won was the hatred, was prejudice, it was racism, and nothing impoverishes us more as people than we feel superior to others, including religiously. Which is precisely what tells us here. Why am I saying that? Because many people believe in God, not the same way we, not as intensity as us, and sometimes have achieved much better results than us.
As we bid farewell on Path of Faith, we extend our heartfelt gratitude for your presence. Keep the conversation going by commenting below, liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel for more soul-nourishing messages.